Mumbai studios of Republic TV, it's time for Arnab Goswami on the debate.
Arnab Goswami on the debate at 10, powered by Kar Dekho and Royal Ranthambore.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, and my guest in this segment, who's going to be live with me, in fact, he already is former ambassador of the to the United Nations in the Bush administration and the former national security advisor of the United States, Ambassador John Bolton. It'll be a pleasure to take his views. He has very radical, very strong views on what's happening in Ukraine, how Russia is to be dealt with. But before we go across to him, for the last 2 weeks, the entire global focus is on Eastern Europe and the rhetoric coming in from Washington. The question on everyone's mind is, what is next? Before we go to former US NSA John Bolton, here is the current situation on the ground.
It's the first signal of intensifying conflict. Separatist-controlled Holivka in Donetsk has witnessed shelling.
Now, on this residential street, there has been at least one impact. Some of the neighbors say it could be up to 10 incoming mortar shells. And here is where a shrapnel piece went through this residential window.
This is the second such attack in the last 24 hours.
Right now I'm in Donetsk, one of the major cities of the anti-Ukraine government-controlled territory, and it seems the Ukraine war front line is erupting in battle this morning. This is breaking news. Just not long ago, the anti-government forces of both the LPR and DPR have announced and accused Ukraine of attacking all across the front line, and they have said they are retaliating, as they put it.
The series of shelling in East Ukraine has raised alarm in Moscow.
Ну и, конечно, поговорим о региональной ситуации, оценим, как идет военное сотрудничество, сейчас активная фаза учений военных. Завтра вместе даже поучаствуем в одном из серьезных мероприятий вот в этом комплексе военного сотрудничества. Я очень рад вас видеть. Добро пожаловать.
NATO powers continue to station arsenal in East Europe, anticipating a Russian escalation. And the drumbeats of war continue to ring from Washington.
How high is the threat of a Russian invasion right now?
It's very high.
Why?
It's very high because they have not moved any of their troops out. They've moved more troops in. Number one. Number two, we have reason to believe that they are engaged in a false flag operation to have an excuse to go in.
The Russia claims to be moving back from the borders and withdrawing troops from military drill sites. Putin is ready with another drill with Belarus. This time, joint nuclear drills in the region has kept the West on its toes. Global powers are on the edge with regards to the situation in East Europe, and the next few days could prove crucial to determine the course of conflict. Bureau Report, Republic TV.
Ambassador Bolton, been reading some of your comments. You've been very critical of the current U.S. administration's response. You've said that the American government is being timid with Russian President Vladimir Putin. What would you want the Americans to do? What would, in your view, mean being not timid with Putin?
Right. Well, look, the effort here that the Biden administration is engaged in is to create sufficient deterrence that Russia does not invade Ukraine. And the way they've done that is to threaten economic sanctions if and when Russian forces ever cross the line. Now, that's a way to establish deterrence. In principle, there's nothing wrong with it. The issue, however, is whether these threats have enough credibility to deter Vladimir Putin. And I'm afraid they do not. Remembering that after Russia invaded Georgia in August of 2008, the West's response was very, very timid. After Russia annexed the Crimea and it put little green men, as they were called, the irregular forces into eastern Ukraine, there was no response from Obama and the West. At the beginning of the Biden administration, he waived sanctions on the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, notwithstanding pressure even at that point by Russia on Ukraine. And then to top it off, the catastrophic withdrawal from Afghanistan, I think, has had reverberations in Moscow and Beijing, really all around the world. So I think Putin is not deterred, at least that's the risk. And let's be clear, even if Biden is able to put significant sanctions on Russia and the Europeans go along with it after the invasion, nonetheless, it still means if hostilities break out, that deterrence has failed, meaning that Putin did not see in his cost-benefit analysis he was really going to be hurt by these sanctions. So to me, it doesn't look good. And I think while I don't think Putin has made a final decision to invade, I think he's fully capable of doing it.
No, but I also understand from what you're saying, the practical scenario is that the West can't do anything. America,
well, I think
NATO
we could have done more.
Anything.
I think we could have done more. It may be too late now, but I will give you a couple examples of what we could have done. And by that, I mean the U.S. and NATO acting together. I think we should have sanctioned Nord Stream 2 months ago. I think we should have sanctioned it in the Trump administration, but at least it was still possible to do a couple months ago to say to Putin, look, Nord Stream 2 is never going to become operational unless and until you get Russian forces out of the Donbass and out of Crimea, let alone start another war. We should have done that. I think we should have put American and NATO troops, more of them, into Ukraine. Up until a few days ago, we had elements of the Florida National Guard training, working with Ukrainian forces. I think we could have put more in to train and assist the Ukrainian military, not to fight the Russians, but so those Russian generals looking through their field glasses across the border would have seen a lot of American and other NATO flags and said, I wonder what that means. We had to change Putin's cost-benefit analysis. I don't think we've done that.
I just want to take a moment to explain to all our viewers, what Ambassador John Bolton, former NSA of USA, is saying essentially is that he's saying that the Americans, the West, NATO should have put pressure, economic pressure of some kind, so that there would be a loss on Moscow if it were to be aggressive with Ukraine. He talks about Nord Stream 2. Now, what is the Nord Stream, viewers? The Nord Stream is basically a massive oil pipeline through which Russia exports oil. And Nord Stream started, I think, 2011. Nord Stream 2 has two pipelines, which a huge amount of oil coming from Russia to Europe. Now, that's my question. So Russia, viewers, makes a lot of money selling oil to Europe. What Ambassador Bolton is saying, that the West should have squeezed Russia by saying, you fight in Ukraine, we're not going to buy the oil, we are going to make the oil unavailable. However, my counter question to you, Ambassador Bolton, is this, that Nord Stream 2, massive undersea gas pipeline from Russia to Germany, is at stake. But Germany is not joining other NATO countries in providing weapons to Ukraine. And I think what Putin has done very intelligently is he's divided Europe. The biggest buyers of Russian oil and gas, Germany, Italy, Netherlands. Italy's been in two minds. There's government pressure, but the business communities are not listening. Germany is divided. So hasn't Putin been very smart? He's divided Europe, divided your own allies, outsmarted
Look,
America.
I don't disagree with you. Yeah, I don't disagree with you. That's exactly what I'm worried about. I think the Germans are weak on this question because of their dependence on Russian oil and natural gas. You know, their former chancellor, Gerhard Schroeder, has long been involved in the Nord Stream 2 project. And just a few weeks ago, he actually became a member of the board of directors of Gazprom,
yes,
the biggest Russian hydrocarbon enterprise. I think Emmanuel Macron, the president of France, he's in a very tight re-election contest to be president this year. And he's been talking about negotiations on restructuring security arrangements in Europe. I think Putin sees these as signs of weakness and division within NATO. And I think one of Putin's principal strategic objectives has been to fracture NATO. In his mind, a weaker NATO is a stronger Russia. Now, Joe Biden talks endlessly about how united the alliance is. I hope he's right, but I don't think he is. I think Putin sees better than he does what the divisions are. And if at a relatively low cost to Russia, Putin can further weaken NATO, that's an objective he has long sought.
Ambassador Bolton, I also heard you say that had Trump stayed or had Trump got a second term, he would have given away Ukraine. And that is a very big statement coming from you because you were Donald Trump's national security advisor. And you have gone on record saying had Donald Trump stayed, he would have given away Ukraine. In other words, you're suggesting that Donald Trump had some understanding with Putin? And are you saying that on the basis of just reasoned guessing, personal experience, some inside knowledge?
Well, I'm saying what I said was if Trump were president, Russian troops would be in Kiev already. And I think that's right, not because of a personal understanding between Trump and Putin, but because I think Trump had no understanding, no realization what the loss of Ukraine to Russian control would have meant for the security of Europe. He was more concerned about finding Hillary Clinton's computer server. He was more concerned about the allegations that Joe Biden's son was making money off the Ukrainians and this web of conspiracy theories. I think Trump badly damaged U.S.-Ukraine relations. And I think had he been reelected, Putin would have seen the opportunity right there to fracture NATO. The trouble is that Biden's response is not perhaps as weak as Trump's might have been, but I don't think it's adequate. And I think the result in both cases would have been in giving Putin an opportunity if Trump were there, but has given him an opportunity with Biden there.
Isn't all of this of late making Trump look stronger? What happened in Afghanistan, what is happening now, the confusion in NATO, the inability to deal effectively with Putin. In contrast, layman terms, Trump comes across a stronger person.
Well, I don't think he was. I think he was more blustery than Biden. But I think Trump made it very clear he wanted out of Afghanistan. And, it's easy to say, as he has said, I would have done it better. But I think the withdrawal would have looked almost as catastrophic. And really, the strategic point would have been the same. American withdrawal, whether executed well or executed poorly, was a strategic mistake.
When you were NSA or on other occasions, have you had any opportunity to interact with Putin? And otherwise, what is your sense of it? Because in an earlier answer, you talked about his strategic objectives. I think it's become, the favorite hobby in academic and journalistic circles now to analyze Putin. I don't think there's anyone else in the world who's being analyzed in university campuses, talk shows, everywhere. What is your understanding of Putin? What is your personal experience? And what do you think he wants? What is his end game?
Well, I've met with him several times, including at that table you're showing on your screen right now. Although back then, pre-COVID, we talked across the center of the table, not from either end of it. I first met him when I was the State Department person with Donald Rumsfeld. There's that table again. With Donald Rumsfeld in October of 2001. So I've had a number of extensive conversations with him. I think he's very tough-minded, and I think he knows what he thinks Russia's national interests are, and he pursues them relentlessly. And that distinguishes him, I think, from both Trump and Biden, who don't have nearly the determination to get what they think their objectives are. So I'm very worried about how the U.S. is responding and how NATO are responding. I don't think we took Russia seriously enough as we should have. And I think in part now we're facing the consequences of not being as clear about our own national interest as Putin is.
So let me twist that a bit. In your view, is Putin good for Russia and for Russians?
No, I think this is going to turn out badly for Russia in one of two ways. Either he will now be completely isolated from the West as a result of sanctions, or if the sanctions are not effective, he will take it as a lesson he can do more in Belarus, in Moldova, in Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan, in the Central Asian republics. I think if the West's response is not firm, it will simply increase his appetite for more adventurism. And I think to the extent that Western sanctions are effective, reducing, for example, his markets for Russian oil and gas, he'll simply turn more to China, which is an energy-poor country and can buy all the oil and gas that Russia can sell. I think that's going to turn out badly for Russia as well. Being the junior partner in a Russia-China entente is not going to end up well for Russia.
Could he take away a slice of Ukraine to just make a point? You know, we've seen incidents for, Russian-speaking population of Donbass. Ukrainian military is already saying that, Russia has submitted allegations of the Ukraine military committing genocide in Donbass. Could he just take away a slice, make his point, and then go back?
Yeah, I think this rhetoric about what's going on in Donbass and Luhansk is Russian propaganda, honestly. But I do think that one of his options is something much less than a full invasion to take over all of Ukraine. I think he may well look at additional territory in eastern and southern Ukraine along the northern shore of the Black Sea. If you look at maps of what I'll call predominantly cultural Russian areas, Russian-speaking areas, areas that are where the people are Eastern Orthodox rather than Catholic. I think this is kind of an L on the southern and forms an L on the southern and eastern sides of the country, that he might well do something like that. And the risk for America and the West is that a lot of people would say, well, is that all he's doing? It could have been a lot worse. And our sanctions will be much less than those that have been threatened, which will teach Putin exactly the wrong lesson.
When push comes to shove, one doesn't know how far Putin will go, and push comes to shove, what will America be able to do? I mean, it's also been argued that this is right on China's, Russia's doorstep, so they have an edge. So does Putin hold all the cards? Ambassador Bolton, we are hearing about nuclear drills by Russia, military drills, 19th February, involving launching of practice launches of intercontinental ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, all to be personally supervised by Putin himself. So is America going to get spooked when all of this is shown on American television to the people in America? Are Americans going to be spooked by this?
Well, I'm worried the Biden administration will be spooked. I think what Putin is doing here and much of his posturing on Ukraine is what in Cold War days we would have called brinkmanship. And I think Putin, to a certain extent, has ice water in his veins. And he's able to go to the brink in much better ways than we are. We don't have a Dwight Eisenhower anymore. We don't have a Ronald Reagan in the White House.
Yeah.
And I think Putin thinks that if he can push us far enough, that we or some of the Europeans will begin to give way, and that will give him his splits in NATO. Biden made a big mistake early in this crisis by saying flatly, and he's repeated it, that there will be no use of U.S. forces to protect Ukraine. Now, we don't want hostilities to begin with, but when you take that possibility off the table right at the beginning and get nothing in return for it, that just makes Putin's job that much easier. It was a bad mistake for Biden to have made.
Are we looking at a bigger Cold War? And from your understanding, India, other countries, other major powers in the region, across the world all watching. A lot of major powers just watching. You know, Russia's appreciated India's position. Putin came down here recently for a visit with Prime Minister Modi. There are strategic defense partnerships. India's balanced it out. But given in a medium term, 6 months, 1 year from now, if this drags, you think major powers will remain, have the choice to remain neutral or not committed to either side?
No, I don't think so. I think people.
Or is this going to become bigger?
Yeah, I think people have got to decide whether they want to see international borders changed by force. That's what the issue is with Ukraine right now. And I think India's got a very significant decision to make about its future. I wish India were not buying S-400 air defense systems from Russia. I wish India were moving away from its long-term strategic reliance on Russia for advanced weapons. I think there are a lot of other countries they could turn to. And I think India and the United States have a real need here for closer relations to deal with China. If we could find a way to split Russia and China, I would try and do it if it didn't mean compromising the independence of countries in Europe. That's another subject India and the U.S. could talk about, because it's not in India's interest either to see Russia grow closer to China. So the stakes are pretty high here, I think, not just in 6 months or a year, but for the rest of this century.
On that, I agree with you. I don't completely agree with your take on S-400 missiles, because I think it's good for every country to leverage its defense relationships across the world. But Ambassador Bolton, it's such a pleasure to talk to you, and I do hope we can remain engaged, because a lot of viewers across the country are appreciating your words. I thank you very much.
Well, I appreciate the invitation to be on, and I always enjoy it and hope we can do it again.
We will. We shall. Thank you so much. Thank you, Ambassador Bolton.
Take care.
Thank you. And ladies and gentlemen, that was Ambassador John Bolton. We're putting up the whole interview on republicworld.com in case you'd like to share it with anyone, because I think that was very insightful.